Welcome to the Today is a Good Day podcast, a podcast to bring you a new point of support as you navigate your NICU journey. Today is a Good Day is here to be a part of your conversations, whether your baby was born prematurely, has special needs, or if your family is grieving a loss. The voices you will hear on the Today is a Good Day podcast are personal stories from people who have been there. Please don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast listening app. In this episode, we are learning about a new social venture working to improve the well-being of parents and their babies. Babyhood Lab was founded and is headed by Dr. Jessic Gaulton in partnership with her colleagues at Newborn Special Care Associates. Dr. Gaulton is an attending physician in neonatology and director of perinatal innovation at Abington Hospital-Jefferson Health. She is also a Today is a Good Day board member. Her expertise lies at the intersection of medicine, design, and entrepreneurship. She completed her fellowship in neonatology at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Penn Medicine. Dr. Gaulton received her medical degree from the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and a Master of Public Health in Health Policy and Management from the Harvard School of Public Health. Dr. Gaulton graduated Summa Cum Laude from Cornell University. The Babyhood Lab brings together a multidisciplinary group of clinicians, designers, entrepreneurs, and parents who are already designing products and delivering services to improve the postpartum experience, to foster innovation from within the healthcare system, and create change for families. Personally, I've been asked to serve on the advisory board for the Babyhood Lab, and I'm excited to continue supporting families, especially those navigating the NICU. Welcome, Dr. Gaulton. Great to see you.
Thank you so much.
So you have to tell us a little bit about yourself. What made you choose the NICU as your area of focus so many years ago? What's your why?
That's an excellent question, Martha. I think the moment that I knew I wanted to be a neonatologist is when I was a resident. I was actually an intern at the Brigham, rotating through the NICU. And I remember seeing the babies in the isolates and how fragile and incredible the care was there. And actually, really what it was a mentor of mine who encouraged me to go into neonatology. He somehow saw something in me and just brought me into the care, brought me into the stories of the families. And I just got really inspired through that experience at the Brigham.
And when you talk about inspiration, what inspired this whole idea around the Babyhood Lab?
Yeah, so actually, I'm a mother of two. My daughter, Addie, is 5, and my son, William, is 3, and they are just the most wonderful kids in the whole world. When I gave birth to Addie, afterwards, I really struggled with postpartum depression and anxiety, and I actually didn't know that I was struggling at the time with her. I had just moved to Philadelphia. I was starting a neonatology fellowship at CHOP, and I cried in the call room every night when I went back to work after having her. I remember pumping while I was on call at CHOP and having to run to an emergency and throwing off the pumps and spilling milk and crying. Crying.
Literally overspilled milk.
Literally overspilled milk. And really what it was with her was a combination of struggling to breastfeed, going back to work, being a working mom, a trainee, working over 80 hours a week, not feeling I had quality time with her, and feeling guilt about being at work, guilt about being at home, and realizing after that postpartum experience that I really was struggling beyond what I had really thought at that time. So, and then with my second child, William also struggled. I was still a fellow. It was 18 months later. And at that point, I sort of knew, because reflecting back on my first experience having Addie, I knew that I wanted a different experience. But it took me 6 months to figure that out. And with him, he wouldn't breastfeed. Really, with him, the core of what I struggled with was breastfeeding. He never latched. He had a tongue tie. We got him his tongue tie snipped. It's called a frenotomy. And that didn't seem to help. And so I was still a fellow at CHOP. I was in my second year. and I was pumping around the clock. And again, it was the same sort of thing. It was like feeling detached from him, feeling like I didn't have quality time with him, struggling to pump at work, and feeling just really sad and really anxious. And so at that point, after 6 months of pumping and being a fellow, I turned towards one of my colleagues and I just opened up to that colleague, because with the first time around, I really didn't feel comfortable talking to people because I was new there, didn't know people very well. I didn't know where to reach out for help. But the second time around, I said, okay, look, I know I don't want to have the same experience. So I turned to a colleague and she said, let me put you in touch with somebody who is a female physician at CHOP and who guides a lot of women, like is a great guide for women, a mentor. And so I talked to her and she said, Jess, you got to let something go. It's either going to be maybe you take a break from fellowship, from your training program, or you got to stop pumping. You're killing yourself over this. And so I stopped pumping at 6 months and my world changed. You know, I had more quality time with my son. And really enjoyed being a mom at that point. And so going through those two postpartum experiences, I realized that I really, really didn't want other women to struggle like I did. I wanted to find ways that I could help other moms. And outside of my clinical responsibilities of being a doctor, I really wanted to focus my energy on that. And I felt like as I was going through those experiences, the healthcare system was broken. I found so many gaps and holes in areas where I really felt like there needed to be more services that are easily accessible to moms. For example, mental health services in the postpartum period, breastfeeding support services. Yes. And so especially for moms in our community that I serve right now.
And how wonderful for you to come out and share your story, which then prompted you to really start the Babyhood Lab to help give back and help other mothers as a NICU parent, a fellow mom. It is hard. Those are big topics that so many of us struggle with, don't necessarily feel comfortable coming out and talking about. And it's really great that you have been so open about your journey and how that's impacted what you're doing now. Can you talk to us a little bit about the Babyhood Lab and what the mission of this will be?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Babyhood Lab is an innovation lab that is based at Newborn Special Care Associates, which is a practice of physicians. I'm one of the physicians. We're all neonatologists at Abington Hospital. And so the Innovation Lab really uses design thinking, which may be a new topic to some of you listening. So I'll talk a little bit about what that is, but it uses this design thinking. It's a framework for bringing out innovation, new ideas, testing new ideas, implementing new ideas into healthcare. And actually, it's used in all sectors in business as well. And it actually comes from business. And so I'm trying to integrate design thinking. It's also called human-centered design, if some people have heard of that, into our daily practice, into our culture at Abington to improve the parent experience.
Why did you and the other team members, the other neonatologists at Newborn Special Care, why do you think now was the right time to do this?
You know what? That's a great question for Dr. Chang. He is the chief of neonatology. He is one of the most wonderful people, mentors. He saw something in me. I actually gave a talk at Penn on a project that I had worked on to help moms in the postpartum experience while I was a fellow. He was at that talk and he, I think, saw something and really values thinking differently. And he's an entrepreneur and innovator himself. So I credit him for hiring me. And then during the first year that I was working at Abington, COVID hit. And honestly, the way that I got through COVID was through brainstorming and developing the Babyhood Lab, because it was something I could think about that wasn't COVID related necessarily, and that I could be inspired by, because there was so much pain and suffering around me.
You were talking about human-centered design, design thinking. What do those terms mean?
Yeah.
I mean, really breaking it down for us
Mm-hmm.
as NICU parents who might be listening to this, what does that mean to them?
Yeah. So I'm going to preface the definition by saying that in healthcare, when we do projects like research projects, quality improvement projects, making operational changes or decisions, I've found in my experience that oftentimes we forget to ask the patients what they think. And in our field, it's obviously the parents. And so design thinking really centers on the human experience, human behaviors, emotions. What are patients feeling, thinking, experiencing when they go through something in the hospital? And then what are the providers thinking, feeling, hearing, seeing while they're experiencing it? So I'll give you an example in a minute. And so it really goes back to the human connection, human emotions, human behaviors, and understanding what people experience, and then trying to solve the problem from those perspectives. So I can give you an example that might make it a little bit more concrete.
I feel like that's to some extent why we founded Today is a Good Day too, right? Navigating through the NICU, we saw this gap in care for parents who were trying to figure out how to navigate the NICU journey, and we wanted to try and help fill that gap and help people learn things that we wish we had known going through the NICU with Claire and Mary.
Absolutely. So I'll give you an example that hopefully will make it a little bit more concrete in terms of what design thinking is, what human-centered design is. And so just to sort of define it first, human-centered design focuses on the patient's needs first and their perspectives. And so in the NICU at Abington, we have found that a lot of our moms want to breastfeed. However, because there's so many things going on with their babies, it sort of ends up not being a priority. And we actually surveyed moms in our NICU and found that a lot of moms want to breastfeed, but either don't know that they can or that there are certain barriers. And we didn't really know what those barriers were. And in a lot of situations in healthcare, providers might say, okay, let's assume we know what the patients are experiencing and like try these different things, right? But with design thinking, we're applying this framework, this tool set where we say, okay, no. Instead of just thinking we know what they're going through, we're going to actually interview them. We're not going to have them fill out questionnaires. We're actually going to sit down and talk to them. And so we recruited a designer, Jessica Martin. She is very experienced in interviewing postpartum moms, parents, and other patients. And she has a specific skill set that she trained in design thinking. And so she is going to be interviewing moms and understanding their experience with breastfeeding in the NICU, what the barriers were, and really understanding from their perspective and not assuming anything. And she's not medical, so she's not in the medical field. And so, and through those interviews, we really want to draw out the patient's stories, the mom's stories. What was it like to be in the NICU in a chair that may not be very comfortable, trying to breastfeed your baby with very little privacy? What was that like?
Or I have to say, being scared to do it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I remember from 10 years ago, I pumped because I was told you need to pump. This is the best thing that you can do to help Claire and Mary. And I did. I wasn't very successful at it. But even when we got to the point of possibly breastfeeding Claire, I didn't want her to have to learn something new.
Right.
If she's working on the bottle,
right.
I don't want her to have to try another new task because we were so focused on just trying to help her to get stronger and figure out how to use her body and feed and breathe, suck, swallow, all the different things that I didn't want to add one more element to it.
Right.
When I think back on that time and in the conversation we're having right now, what are some of those questions that parents like me who thought, oh, I don't want to have her try something new, or parents who say, I don't even know what to ask the neonatologist, or I'd like to breastfeed, but I don't know when I'm supposed to ask to do that. What do you recommend that they ask their medical team and the nurses who are caring for their babies?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think at the beginning of the NICU stay. So most parents don't know before their baby's admitted that the baby's going to be admitted to the NICU. Some parents do, because you have a scheduled C-section at a certain on a certain date, and you know your infant is going to be
Or if you're on bed
premature.
rest and you know that
right.
baby has high likelihood of coming early, that type of situation.
Exactly. However, a lot of moms don't know. And so I think they're thrown into the situation where they're just like, and they don't have any experience with the NICU. So they just don't know what to expect. And so I think at the very beginning of the NICU stay, just asking the team saying, do you think it's a reasonable expectation to be able to breastfeed my baby? And how can I get there? And then expressing their desire, their feeding desire. Because like one mom might know that she definitely doesn't want to breastfeed, doesn't want to pump. Another mom might say, well, I was expecting to have a full-term baby, but my baby came 2 months early. And originally my goal was to breastfeed, and I would still like to do that. But how do I get there? I just don't know. And so both expressing your wish at the beginning, if you know it, and you might not, and that's okay. And also asking the team whether it's a reasonable goal to achieve all the babies in the NICU. And I think there are a lot of things that we can do to set the mom up for success going home and breastfeeding their baby.
Okay. When you look at Babyhood Lab and some of the projects that you're working on, can you fill us in on some that are coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. One, aside from the breastfeeding project, which we are in the midst of these interviews, and just to sort of flesh out that project, after we interview our moms and identify where the major barriers are or the major gaps are, we're going to be developing prototypes for interventions and testing them. And so one of the things that design thinking is really good about is prototyping and testing in rapid cycles. And so a lot of people in healthcare aren't used to doing that. So a lot of people in healthcare are researchers and do big clinical trials, right, with lots of people, and takes a really long time. One thing about design thinking is that it really focuses on rapid testing. And so we're talking 5, 20, 50 patients testing an intervention. So let's say we find out that moms are saying, I don't like breastfeeding in the NICU because it's not private enough. Maybe we find a way to have a more private experience for them while they're in the NICU, a more comfortable experience. We test that in a 2-week time frame and see if that works. Does that we gather feedback from the moms, figure out whether that helps them achieve their goals. And then we continue to make whatever intervention it is that we come up with better over time.
That's great.
And then once we figure out what we think really works for our patients, then that's where you can test it in a quality improvement study or research study. And so this design thinking framework is really great at sort of the beginning steps and understanding where the patients are in terms of their experience. So that's one project, and we're at the beginning of that project. Another project at the Babyhood Lab that we're working on that's a little bit more mature is called Steam and Spin. And actually, Martha, you were involved in this project.
Yes.
And a lot of Today is a Good Day parents were interviewed for this project. So the motivation behind this project came from, actually, it was Dr. Chang's idea. It was a combination of Dr. Chang, Michelle Walker, who's our nurse manager, Dr. Ziegler, who's our medical director, and a number of nurses in the NICU, and as well as Emily Hiriak, who's our dietitian. So a lot of people came together and noticed that the way that moms are sterilizing their breast pump equipment in the NICU is not ideal. And I'll describe.
I remember that. It was not ideal.
What did you do, Martha?
Well, if I think back, I think that I took enough supplies with me to pump while I was there and then took everything home to clean it and then would bring it back. If I am, now it's been a while, but if I recall, I believe that's what I did.
And
I would just do a quick rinse in the sink and then take everything home with me.
And what did you do at home? How did you clean your pump
Steamer
supplies?
bags, usually in the microwave is what I use quite a bit.
Got it. Yeah, and that's typically what our moms do. And I always worried about those plastic bags, like do they leach chemicals into
Right.
my pump equipment? I don't know. There's no research out there on that. And are there bacteria being trapped in the water? And like, is this really clean? I don't know. And so for preemies, as this audience knows, it's really important that it's very well sterilized, right? Because like a bacterial infection in a NICU could be devastating for our babies. And that it does happen, unfortunately. And the way that moms are sterilizing their pump equipment is puts the pump equipment at risk of trapping bacteria in there. And we obviously want to prevent any bacterial outbreaks in our NICU. And moms are pumping. About 96 to 98% of our moms pump and for their babies in the NICU. And they're pumping all day long. So every 2 to 3 hours, 2 to 3 to 4 hours, they are pumping at home or in the NICU. You know how long it takes.
Time.
A lot of time. It's like probably an hour to really like complete a pump session.
It's a long time.
Including everything, right? Putting the pump equipment on, pumping, washing, sterilizing.
And depending if you pump by the bedside or if you go into a room to pump, it can be kind of isolating, just sitting by yourself in the one room. So I oftentimes say that's part of the reason we created the Today is a Good Day podcast. It was a great opportunity for families or moms when they're pumping to listen and have something to do, because I remember not having much to do during that period of time when you step away.
You're literally spending all day and a lot of the night doing this as a mom, and you're separated from your baby. And I struggled having full-term babies doing this and being a working mom. I just can't even imagine being a mom and not even being able to see your baby. Luckily at Abington, you can see your baby on the camera. Every baby has a camera at the bedside. But so they're spending so much time doing this. And then what they're doing typically in the NICU is they're using these bags. You pour water in them, put your pump equipment in them, put them in the microwave. And then a lot of moms are putting the pump equipment either in a bag a bag to dry with mesh or something, or out on a surface to dry, or in something else to dry. There are a lot of different ways that moms are doing this. And so on average, it takes about 3 hours for their pump equipment to dry. So you probably have multiple sets of pump equipment, and then it's at risk of trapping bacteria, other germs in there, and because a lot of the time they're sitting in wet.
Probably in most
wet environment, right. So what we did was we interviewed a lot of moms and dads, including Martha, to understand your experience and what it was like and where the frustrations are. And we interviewed probably about 100 people. So we not only interviewed parents, but also staff. We interviewed the people who actually clean the pumps in the NICU.
Oh, wow.
We interviewed everyone across the board who's involved in this in the NICU. And designed a device through this design thinking process, designed a new device that's specific to the NICU, designed by our NICU moms and for the NICU. And so I wish I could show you a picture. It's very hard to visualize, but imagine sort of a salad spinner, right? So basically steam and spin. You put your pumping equipment into a basket, and every mom has their own basket and lid. And then there's one base and there will be a couple of bases in the NICU to share. And then the base is basically like an electrical motor that plugs into the electrical socket. Then every mom brings over their basket and their lid. You put your pump equipment in the basket, put the lid on, and then pour in some water. And the water steams the pump equipment, sterilizes it in less than a minute, and then spins and dries it. And and then you just literally take your basket with the lid and it's dry, it's sterilized.
It's ready to go.
It's ready to go.
Yep.
So we're expecting that it'll decrease the time that moms have to pump by significantly, and hoping that this will be a really great solution for moms in the NICU, but also at home too, to be able to sterilize their pump equipment faster and more effectively.
And when I hear you talking about, I was interviewed for this project. I know a lot of our Today is a Good Day volunteers were interviewed for this project, local families. I'm sure there are families out there listening to this now saying, oh, I have feedback on this, or I have feedback on what this experience was like. How do they get involved in this process?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. I would love for anyone listening who's excited about this to reach out to me to give us feedback, because right now we have a prototype. We're going to be testing it and putting it into the hands of parents, moms in the NICU who will be using it, and getting feedback to make the prototype, the device, better and more easy to use. And so, yeah, absolutely. If anyone is listening and wants to get their hands on this prototype, use it, give us feedback, please reach out. And I just have to say that this project was co-developed by the Health Design Lab, which is another innovation lab downtown in Philadelphia through Jefferson. And the founder of that lab is Dr. Bon Ku, who is a designer and an inspiring, really icon in design. So we were so lucky to be able to work with them. And that's actually how we were able to work with a student group. There were 3 medical students and 2 engineering students who were on the team.
Well, and you can take a look at the prototype at babyhoodlab.com, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So you can go visit and take a look at that. And I think hearing from listeners too, it's a great way to start projects to be reviewed and say, hey, this was a concern I had when I was in the NICU, or this is something that I have feedback on that I went through, just how this started with the breastfeeding, right? And looking at postpartum depression is one of the other topics we're going to be covering.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I'd mentioned my own experience, and I did not realize I was struggling to the extent that I was when I was going through it. And I believe that, having worked with a lot of moms now as a physician, I do believe that some moms like me don't necessarily know that they're struggling. And maybe that's not the case for everybody. But I believe that we need to be more proactive in supporting moms and determining if they are struggling, because so much of the focus is on the baby after you have a baby that a lot of women forget to take care of themselves, right? I'm guilty of that.
Yes.
And so what we're going to be doing is starting a project to better screen for postpartum depression and mood disorders at Abington, and also treat postpartum mood disorders at Abington. And so what we would like to do, and this is a very early stage project, we have a lot of people involved on the OB side, on the peds and NICU side at Abington, leadership at the hospital. And what we would like to do is to be able to text moms the postpartum depression screening questionnaire. We'll probably use a couple of the questions, text it to them, and proactively screen moms earlier than they normally would be screened. So right now they're being screened while they're in the hospital, and then at 6 weeks. And as I'm sure you've experienced too, Martha, 6 weeks is a long time. By the time 6 weeks happened for both of my babies, all of the problems that I had already happened, and I'd already pretty much figured out what I was going to do at that 6 week mark. So, and only 40% of women in our country show up to that 6 week postpartum visit with their OB. So there is a big movement in this area to screen earlier. And so we're hoping to do that by text for all of our moms, and then flag the moms that are really struggling and plug them into support with a therapist who specifically focuses in the postpartum mental health space, and be able to do that through telehealth right now, because telehealth really truly is the future, given everything that's happened with COVID.
Well, and as you were talking about having full-term babies and experiencing the postpartum struggles, add the layer of the NICU, of going to the NICU every day. You talk about the self-care. So many moms spend how many hours a day in the NICU, right? Without going to eat, without going home to shower and rest and heal from giving birth. And so that is such a great concept to reach out earlier and to try and see those red flags earlier in the process to give the help that's needed.
Yeah. I don't think that we should wait for the moms to reach out to us. I really think that we have to reach out to them and proactively support them in this particular situation.
Dr. Gaulton, I'm so excited to be a part of this group and for all that we are going to accomplish moving forward. Now, you've worked with a lot of NICU families in many different ways over the years. What's the biggest lesson you've learned from a NICU family?
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That's a hard question,
I
Martha. I've learned so many lessons.
And it can be pieces of, things that you've
Mhm.
just learned over the years from different families that have come across
Yeah.
your path.
Thinking about this, I think the lesson that I've learned is that it's okay to be vulnerable as a doctor. So when I was struggling in the postpartum period, I felt like I have to be strong. I'm a doctor. I'm a neonatologist. I shouldn't show any weakness. Like, I can't talk to any of my colleagues about what I'm going through. I kept it all in, and that actually did not help. And so now I'm talking more openly about my struggles because I think it's okay for doctors to be vulnerable. And so there is one particular family in the NICU I remember was going through such a rough time. Baby was going to die, was dying while I was talking with them. And at first, my approach was a little bit like, I can't get emotionally involved because otherwise I'm going to cry. And they don't want to see me cry. I'm supposed to be strong for them. But then what I realized as I was talking to them, it was okay to show them that I was sad. And so I actually did cry with them. And that was the appropriate response at the time. And so I did show vulnerability. And I feel like sometimes I do need to do that. And I need to step out of that, I'm a doctor shell. And so, vulnerability, I think, is the main lesson I've learned over the last 2 years at Abington.
I'm smiling here under my mask because, as you know, we became very close with the entire team of neonatologists who took care of our daughters. And those moments where they were vulnerable and really sat with us in what we were going through when Mary passed away and with Claire fighting as hard as she did meant the world to us. And I think it made our relationship stronger to this day, so many years later, that we've stayed in touch with them.
And that's actually the thing that I love most about working at Abington is that I get to know the families so well, and I get to follow them in clinic afterwards. And a lot of them reach out to me afterwards on a personal level. And that connection, I always thought like I needed to distance myself, but I actually love that connection. That's what makes the job so fulfilling.
So I just asked what impact a NICU family has made on you and what are lessons that you've learned from them. Let's flip that and say, what is your biggest piece of advice that you give to NICU families when they're getting ready to graduate from the NICU? And I'll even add on, this is a really difficult time with COVID-19. So I'm sure that your approach with families has changed a little bit in the advice you're giving them as they're getting ready to walk out that door. But would love to hear some advice that you give to families.
You are really good at the hard questions today, Martha.
We trust in what you say.
I also think it's really important, I not to sound like a broken record, but I do think it's really important for families also to be vulnerable with us and to tell us what they're going through. Because a lot of the time, I feel like patients tell me what they think I want to hear. And not always, definitely not always, but sometimes I have a hard time drawing out what their experience is. And it is so hard to talk to your doctor in the hospital when there's so much going on. But if you feel comfortable talking to anyone on the team, it doesn't have to be the doctor, it can be anyone. If you're really struggling, please let us know because we want to help. And truly, we are there for you. And so I think it goes both ways. Like I have to be vulnerable as a provider, and I would like my families to be vulnerable with me too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Learning more about all the exciting projects and opportunities to get involved and to give feedback and be a part of this project with the human-centered design. It's so important. It's wonderful what you're doing.
Thank you, Martha.